Yeah, we got to talk about the elephant in the room. Not that I haven't uploaded a Dynasty video in 4 months. We'll skip over that. Instead, we're going to look at Tank Dell. I'm going to talk about what I got wrong here and the overall trend that is going to continue going forward in the NFL, particularly with this 2024 draft class. But the first thing I want to do is outline how damn good Tank Dell's been this season. Tank Dell scored 7 touchdowns, 709 receiving yards, 47 receptions off of 75 targets. He's been immaculate. I think the majority of this reason comes from CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud's playing like an MVP level quarterback. It's incredible. But nonetheless, Tank Dell's been phenomenal in fantasy. If you're looking at our redraft channel, I literally just ranked Tank Dell as the wide receiver 7 this week. Yeah, the wide receiver 7 for week 13. It is obnoxious. And I was not big on Tank Dell in Dynasty rookie drafts this year. I mean, I wish I was one of the smart guys going out there and screaming, oh my gosh, this guy Tank Dell, he has the production profile. There's really no solidified depth chart in Houston. Great pickup in round 3. I wish I was smart enough to say that, but sadly I was not. And the reason being, well, I agreed that Tank Dell did have a great production profile. Well, I agreed it was a pretty good situation. We just simply had never seen a wide receiver in fantasy be successful at Tank Dell's size. If we're going to go through and look at all wide receiver finishes from the year 2000 to 2022, from wide receivers that were 165 pounds or fewer, the best season we ever saw was from Taylor Gabriel in 2018, where he scored 153.9 points. To put into context how bad that is, the best season we've ever seen at 153 points would have been outscored by 46 wide receivers last season. Yeah, 46. So you're telling me the ceiling that we've historically seen is a high-end wide receiver 5, low-end wide receiver 4. Well, Tank Dell's completely busted this and now has caused me to reevaluate our process and to look at the changing data that we have for a changing game, which is the NFL. And I want to go through and I want to look at some overall benchmarks. Let's compare the NFL today versus the NFL over the past 20 years. So if you go from the year 2000 to the year 2020, you only had 10 fantasy finishes of 100 points or more from wide receivers that weighed fewer than 170 pounds. So that 20-year time period, let's repeat this. You had 10 wide receivers or 10 fantasy finishes, a couple of these guys repeated, over 100 points at this size. The best season we ever saw was 183 points, which 27 wide receivers hit last year. So the best season we ever saw was the low-end wide receiver 3. However, if we go through and compare this to what we've had over the past 4 seasons, so we're looking at the 21-year time period before to the 4-year time period most recent, you've had 11 wide receivers go over 100 points. We've seen the max be 244 points scored from a wide receiver that weighed fewer than 170 pounds. This is a night and day difference. We are seeing guys like Devonta Smith, Hollywood Brown, now Tank Dell, Josh Downs leading the way and really showing us that the wide receiver position can score points at this small of a size. So now that we've established the trend of smaller wide receivers dominating in today's NFL, let's go ahead and let's move on to what the bigger wide receivers are doing. So what I wanted to look at is I wanted to look at the wide receivers that weigh more than 220 pounds that were able to average 20 points per game from the past 5 seasons and then the 19 years before. So over the past 5 seasons, these wide receivers, the alpha, the big-bodied guys, to post 20 points per game or more, A.J. Brown may do it this season. You potentially have one guy over the past 5 years. A.J. Brown right now is at 20 points per game flat for the Philadelphia Eagles. So at best, you're averaging one player per 5 years. Whereas we go from the year 2000 to the year 2018, and this 19-year time period, if you keep on pace, what we've seen over the past 5 years, you'd have about 3 or 4 guys that were able to do it. But no, 21 fantasy finishes from wide receivers this size or higher. Obviously, this is the era dominated by guys like Julio Jones, Terrell Owens, Calvin Johnson, Josh Gordon, Brandon Marshall, Andre Johnson, Demaryius Thomas. these big-bodied alpha wide receivers were able to dominate in the NFL pretty much over the past 20 years, but it's changing now. And I have a couple different theories on why this may be changing. But I think that the number one reason is just the way that the game is played, in that defensive backs are no longer able to be as physical with these wide receivers. So back in the day, when they could be more lenient, when they can grab onto jerseys, when they can play more physical, it did matter to have that size to win at the catch point, right? If you're battling off a defensive back for that ball, it's going to help if you're 6'3", if you are 225 pounds, so you can just essentially power this guy down. However, you never really see that profile of a wide receiver dominating the NFL today. Instead, when defensive backs aren't able to be as physical, what instead is prioritized is the ability to create space and not necessarily have to win at the catch point. When you're breaking now in the NFL 5 yards downfield, the defensive back can't grab onto your jersey. He can't hold you whatsoever. We've seen the defensive holding calls just absolutely skyrocket over the past 3 to 4 seasons. And this has led these smaller, shiftier wide receivers to now start dominating in fantasy. Now, I don't want to come out here and say, okay, this means you can no longer draft big-bodied wide receivers. The guys that are 6'4", 220 pounds, we need to be avoiding them in fantasy. No. I'm not going to say that at all. I mean, if you look at what we've had from 2020 to 2023, wide receivers that weighed 215 pounds or more that were drafted inside the top 80 picks, you had A.J. Brown, T. Higgins, DK Metcalf, Chase Claypool, Drake London, Laviska Shenault, Michael Pittman Jr., Treylon Burks, and J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. Now, of course, Whiteside, Burks, Shenault, Claypool, these guys are massive busts, right? I mean, yes, you can say, oh, okay, well, these guys didn't work. But come on, we're not going to be avoiding all big wide receivers. I don't want to be the guy missing out on the next A.J. Brown. I don't want to be the guy missing out on the next DK Metcalf, missing out on the next T. Higgins. On the opposite end of the spectrum, though, you go and look at wide receivers that weigh fewer than 190 pounds that were selected inside the top 80 picks. You also have some great guys, right? You have Garrett Wilson. You have Jalen Waddle. You have Chris Olave. You have Devonta Smith. These slender, these smaller wide receivers. Hell, throw in Hollywood. Throw in Deontay Johnson. And ultimately, if we're looking at these two lists, what it tells me is that size isn't necessarily something that we need to be afraid of, but also it is something that we should not knock a prospect on. We should have no hesitation at all on the next Jordan Addison coming out of school, just because the historical hit rates may not be in favor for a wide receiver of that size. You've seen the NFL change now over the past 5 seasons, and this is something that we have to take forward to these 2024 rookies. And if we're going through and looking at this 2024 class, I mean, you're looking at a lot of these players at the very top of the draft board, obviously being big-bodied guys that you can be excited about, where size would never be a concern in the first place. But there is one wide receiver that I already know that is going to be a little bit more controversial. I mean, he does check some boxes, others he doesn't. Xavier Worthy is a wide receiver that maybe in the past I would have been a little bit afraid of, given the fact that, yeah, he's going to be a very small wide receiver. Xavier Worthy is going to show up to the NFL Combine, and hopefully he chugs a bunch of water before he steps on that scale. Hopefully he puts some rocks in his pocket. I don't know, but maybe he goes out there, weighs 170, 175 pounds. He's going to be a slender. He's going to be a small guy. In the past, I probably would have knocked him for it. Now I'm just going to overlook it. We're still going to look at the key metrics that have been proven to impact players at the next level, such as their dominance in college from a market share perspective, such as their breakout age in college, their NFL draft capital, and obviously making sure that they can hit some just very low baselines as an athlete at the combine. But yeah, so here was a 10-minute video essentially hitting some key points. One, I am sorry that I did not identify Tank Dell as that late round value. That's on me. Hopefully I can do better in the future. And two, here's a 10-minute excuse on why I'm able to draft my guy Xavier Worthy, hook 'em horns, in Dynasty rookie drafts this year. But thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Really hope that we were able to help you out a little bit with this video. If you have not done so already, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you play Dynasty Fantasy Football. And yeah, we're going to be ramping up the Dynasty videos going forward. I've missed making them. I have a lot of fun doing these historical research type videos. So if there's anything you want to hear me talk about, please let me know in the comment section. Thank you again. I really do appreciate you, and really hope we get to see you out with a video sometime soon.